paraphrase former Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, plagiarism is a bit like obscenity. It's hard to define, but you know it when you see it. And for some media observers, it's clear that CNN host Fareed Zakaria is guilty of serial plagiarism, one of the worst things you can say about a journalist. But Zakaria says he's been wrongly accused, and for now, his bosses at CNN and The Washington Post seem to agree. Adam Riley has more.
Fareed Zakaria is one of the most prominent journalists covering foreign policy today, known for big gets like this interview with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and for offering counsel to policymakers.
The United States has to act against this terror group, but it should do so at a time and manner of its choosing, rather than jumping when ISIS wants it to jump.
But Zakaria is also known for borrowing from other journalists. In 2009, The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg accused him of pilfering quotes. In 2012, Zakaria was suspended by Time for lifting a hefty passage from The New Yorker's Jill Lepore. And now bloggers at Our Bad Media are accusing Zakaria of dozens of instances of plagiarism. This video juxtaposes a 2010 Dutch documentary on Russia with portions of Zakaria's CNN show, Fareed Zakaria GPS, broadcast a year later.
On the 16th of November 2009, a Russian lawyer died in a Moscow pretrial detention center.
On the 16th of November 2009, a Russian lawyer died in a Moscow detention center.
His name was Sergei Magnitsky.
His name was Sergei Magnitsky.
For Politico's Dylan Byers, the verdict was clear. Fareed Zakaria plagiarized. But Zakaria tells Politico these are all facts, not someone else's writing or opinions or expressions. CNN says it found nothing that gives us cause for concern. And at The Washington Post, where Zakaria writes a column, editorial page editor Fred Hyatt told Politico, "I honestly think it is reckless even to suggest this is plagiarism." If anyone's been reckless, though, it may be Zakaria himself. Emily, CNN also suspended Zakaria 2 years ago for the Jill Lepore lifting, and I think that they're going to end up having to do something like that again. None of the examples cited by Our Bad Media were quite as bad as that Lepore incident, for which Zakaria profusely apologized 2 years ago, but in aggregate, I think they're even worse.
It was actually stunning how many examples, over 2 dozen, and they had pages and pages of them, you know, marked in yellow so you could contrast and compare.
Exactly what
and a lot of it was statistical information, which, you know, he's trying to say, oh, I was just borrowing the facts. I have to say that one thing makes me very uncomfortable about this, and I call it the piling on effect, when you feel like somebody is just out to get him, and it feels a little bit to me like this group, Our Bad Media, and I don't know what their aim is or mission or agenda, but as uncomfortable I am with the potential for plagiarism there, I think I'm equally uncomfortable with this group going after it.
And I guess I part ways with you a little bit there, because I feel like whatever their motives, clearly someone really has an axe to grind with Fareed Zakaria. But that being said, I feel like whatever their motives, if their assertions hold up and they are meticulously documented, as you said, I feel like the motive is relevant.
Well, let me be careful to attribute here. As Steve Buttry, a well-known media observer, has pointed out, the one problem with Our Bad Media is that the 2 people who write for it have chosen to remain anonymous. But the evidence they've dug up really overcomes the anonymity. It's overwhelming. And it's not just on Zakaria's TV show. It's in his books. It's in his magazine pieces. I agree that there's a piling on here, but I think that sometimes when people pile on, it's because you've got such a big fat target. And Fareed Zakaria, unfortunately, because I always used to like the guy's commentary, well, his commentary, I don't know whose it was. I mean, it turns out that he is a profligate and repeat plagiarist. He should be pretty much out of journalism, I would think, at this point.
I don't think it's a piling on. I think what they did in response, and they did respond to people saying, well, why are you anonymous? They said, okay, just look at all these examples that we put here. I think that because he is who he is, 1 or 2 examples was not going to be appreciated. And to me, the most shocking one was the week that he was suspended from Time, the very next week, he then does lifts from somebody else's thing the next week. I mean, this is totally shocking to me. And the reason that all of his bosses haven't done anything, let's just speak the elephant in the room, the guy's a star. Yep. And now they're going to try to figure out how they're going to parse keeping him there in light of, people should read this. It is exact wording.
It
really
time,
is.
But it's worth doing.
Yeah, I sent the links around today to some people who are fans of his just to get their reaction.
And I think another reason for the piling on is that he's been totally uncontrite about this. CNN and CNN and the Washington Post have been uncontrite. So I understand why, when they bring a dozen examples to light and they're kind of shrugged off or dismissed as silly, yeah, you're going to want to press your argument and show that's not where it ends.
And plus, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think Zakaria's strategy is necessarily that bad. When your behavior has been this blatant, I think the only way to survive is to try to brazen it out, and that's what he's doing at this point.
Oh, well, no, that's absolutely what you do. But what I was going to point out is we have spoken about journalists who have done far fewer instances of something that is akin to about 12 of the things that he's done, and they got dismissed. And it was a big deal in our ranks. So for this guy to be sitting there with this clear example, they didn't make up the Time magazine, the Washington Post, the Jill Lepore, and on and on and on
it's funny you say that.
examples.
I went back and looked at the plagiarism charges against Doris Kearns Goodwin recently. And hers was actually fairly extensive too. Remember the Lynn McTaggart?
Yes.
It was the book about not Lincoln, but well,
One
of the presidents, Jefferson. I don't know. Anyway, it was fairly significant, and she totally survived that. I mean, she's still a big star.
It was one book. She never did it again.
Right.
It was a lot of examples.
Yes, there were, absolutely. And if she had ever strayed again, I think it would have ended her career. To her credit, she never did it again. And there are plenty of people who've been looking over her shoulder to see if
that's the other
she
thing.
has.
That was an impressive bit of aggregation work.
Our
bad media did. That's some search engine they had.
And another thing he did to hurt himself, just briefly, you can tell, looking at these examples, that he is trying to do just enough so he's not going to be caught, dropping one word here, adding a couple words there. So he knows that he needs to cover his tracks. He's just not very good.
Makes it harder to Google.
But the other thing
not
about
that much harder.
He's dragging the rest of his team at CNN in with him. So you can't tell me that other people on the team don't know this as well. And they can't say anything because he's the big guy,
We shall see.
I've had students do less than him, and they're gone.